Well, sextortion isn't new, says our next guest, but social media is making it easier to execute. Jacques Marcoux is Director of Research and Analytics at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, and he joins us this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hi, Margot. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thanks for taking the time. So why is it that this group, the 15-year-old boys, are being targeted?
Well, it's not necessarily that it's their age category or anything specific to that. It has a lot to simply do with the fact that offenders who are targeting kids simply go where the kids are. So the kids are on mainstream social media platforms, and that's where it's a numbers game. They are reaching out to children. They are sending direct messages, and they're hoping that a certain percentage will fall for the scam. And so as a result, we see it playing out primarily based on the reports we see. About 80% of the time, it's on mainstream platforms like Snapchat and Instagram seems to be where it happens the most.
And is this a change from what you've seen in the past in terms of who is being affected most often?
So traditionally, when we think about online sextortion, we tend to think of it in terms of women and young girls being the victims, and that is still true, and that historically has been more the case of what was discussed. What we're seeing now, however, is a different trend, and it's a trend that's impacting mostly boys and young men. Based on the last 7,000 to 8,000 cases we've had come in through cybertip.ca since the pandemic, about 85% have been boys and young men. And so when it's boys, it tends to be not so much sexually motivated. The offender isn't motivated by, nude imagery or exploitative imagery. It's actually financial motivation. Whereas with girls, it tends to be perhaps a sexual motivation behind the crime. So with the boys, obviously the exchange of nude images is used as a lever to then extort for money.
So it becomes about money in the end.
That's right.
And do you find that some young people are targeted more than others?
What we see often is when one kid in a community is targeted, we'll often see a flurry of reports coming out of those same small communities. And part of it is because of the design of the platforms themselves. So when you target a child, you also have access when you're communicating with them to their friend network, their list of friends, and from there you can infer whose family, who's an aunt, who's an uncle, what school you might go to. And they collect that information so that when they flip the script on the victim and reveal themselves as an extorter, they can then use that information to as a lever to extort for money. And so as a result, we often then see those offenders just simply work their way through that network because it's like a phone book for other victims, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we often see.
And what can you tell us about these offenders? Who are they exactly?
So, we're not the police. We don't investigate crimes, but we know from other investigations and from a lot of cybersecurity research in the U.S. that primarily this phenomenon that's been targeting boys for the past 3 years is organized crime groups out of West Africa, so Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire. And so these are crime groups, and they simply, like I said earlier, it's a numbers game. They are direct messaging thousands and thousands of Canadian boys and young men across the Canadian prairies, across the U.S., all over the place. And, like I said earlier, they know that if they do it enough, a certain percentage will fall for it and will potentially comply with a ransom. And then that's when payment's made, and then that's when they just keep going with it.
And given what we know is happening from this data in Winnipeg, what should parents be doing?
Well, it's the same advice we would give anyone, any parent, any kid is be careful. If it's too good to be true, it is. Oftentimes accounts that were created yesterday, you can often see the timestamp for when an account was created. That would be a red flag. If the account follows hundreds and thousands of people but has no one following them, that's an inorganic, an unauthentic looking account. So there's a bunch of flags that I think a lot of us now know. But we like to talk also about the responsibility that the platforms have to ensure that these problems don't continue to happen.
And I know we've had some of these conversations in the past, but given what we're hearing about today, what would you like to see the platforms do, and perhaps what would you like to see governments do?
Well, the reality is that the platforms are in control. They see all the traffic. They know that there's a rush of traffic coming from brand new accounts, direct messaging children in Canada with whom they have no previous social connection. So those should all be red flags. Those are all things that companies can do and look at and throttle that kind of traffic to mitigate risk. But they don't do it precisely because there's an obligation for them to do it. And those things, ultimately, it might impact engagement. It might impact all these profit metrics that companies are looking for. So that's why we really need governments to step in and mandate that these companies that put these services into the hands of Canadian kids have obligations to do what's in the interest of their end users and not simply keep dumping the full responsibility onto kids and parents to be safe in these environments that can often be inherently dangerous.
Do you think that will ever happen?
Well, it has happened in some countries, the UK, Australia, Europe, a couple of states in the U.S., they've all adopted online safety laws to some extent that impose duties of care. Canada had a bill on the books up until prorogation, Bill 63, that would have imposed a number of duties of care onto these companies. And so we hope that the Carney government will, hopefully in the near future, table another similar bill.
Where can victims of sextortion get help if they need it?
Well, victims of sextortion can come into our organization. We operate cybertip.ca, which is a place where members of the public can come in for help, advice, and we can help, with best practices on what to do and how to hopefully mitigate any damage that can happen. We also help connect victims with law enforcement if that's what they need. And of course, they can also go straight to their local police detachment.
Great to have you with us today. Thank you, Jacques.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
That is Jacques Marcoux, Director of Research and Analytics at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection.